So we're moving on to the next session of today's event, which is going to be our presentations, our mostly student presentations. So the talks you're about to see were selected from our call for speakers, which we had open for a few months prior to the event. And we really want to thank everyone who applied to be a speaker. We got some really good applications and we're very excited to hear what's about to play. So in this block, we have 4 presentations. They're 15 minutes each, followed by a 5-minute Q&A, where you get to ask your questions again. You can submit the questions in the Q&A box as we've done for the keynote sessions, and the groups and the people, the speakers, will be answering them for you. So in our first presentation, we'll be seeing actually a recorded project. It's a collaborative project hosted by Katharina, Lege from Goethe University in Magdeburg. So the project is titled Neurocafé, a podcast on the psychedelic revolution. So again, we have a theme here. Let's see. In the Neurocafé podcast, 4 students from UniMind Magdeburg, Anne, Caro, Katharina, and Svea, with backgrounds in biology, psychology, as well as philosophy and neuroscience, will be discussing questions that have emerged during the course of their journal club since its inception in 2019. With their diverse perspectives, they will focus on an integrative approach of psychedelic research and debate about the potential of implementing a Bewusstseinskultur, which is culture of consciousness, in today's society. All 4 participants in the podcast will be present for a short Q&A after. And if everyone is ready, we can start playing.
Okay, hello everybody.
Hey there.
Hello, so now we want to share our podcast.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah, okay, so you also can see our picture for the podcast?
Yep.
Okay, nice. And now we will share our audio data.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome to our podcast Neurocafé. I'm Annemarie and I will lead us through the session.
Yeah.
Today we are speaking about altered states of consciousness. Caused by psychedelics or not, those altered states are a subjective experience, a broadening of one's normal mental state, or in other words, a non-ordinary function of the brain. Those states might have the potential to create and promote regenerative structures within our bodies, minds, and even society. That's why we would like to discuss the opportunities which psychedelic experiences can offer for everyone to lead a more meaningful life. Within this context, the concept of integration seems to be fundamental and refers to different levels of psychedelic research, somehow similar as regenerative structures refer to different levels of existence. Therefore, I would like to introduce Kati, Caro, and Svea, who will shed light on this question from different perspectives.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Just like the brain is organized in a top-down manner, we start looking at the keyword that is present in many fields of psychedelic-associated research: regeneration. Kati, what does regeneration imply in a psychological context?
When we talk about regeneration in the context of psychology, one might think of activating inherent resources as well as providing support from the outside to restore an individual's inner equilibrium. So the idea is to raise intrinsic motivation to foster useful behavioral strategies, for example by integrating psychedelic experiences. Or if we take the neuroscience perspective, changes can be reflected by regrowth of nerve tissue.
When we think about psychedelic research, the term integration seems to be very popular, right?
That's true. We encounter the concept of integration on a neural level when looking at the hierarchical organization of the brain. So the idea is that the brain is organized from the most simple to most complex function. This incorporates the integration of information in a top-down manner, meaning under normal conditions we assume that the communication between different brain areas is organized into stable networks, whereby so-called higher-level brain regions, such as the default mode network, are assigned self-referential processes, so to say the integration of oneself or ego. And in the acute effects of psychedelics, we observe that these higher order areas seem to be most strongly affected as the brain reorganizes into new local range networks. Another perspective of integration comes into play when we are thinking of integrating such a psychedelic experience in a person's belief system. This may implicate the need for mediation or therapeutic tools.
Those are very interesting thoughts, Kati. Earlier you talked about plasticity, which brings me to you, Caro. Could you explain to us how regeneration comes about biologically?
Yes, plasticity is indeed a good point here. There are general concepts in biology about how regenerative structures replace, renew, and also refine damaged or old structures within our whole organism. This involves the brain's ability to remodel itself morphologically and functionally at the cellular level. Stimuli are processed and initiate neuronal growth, synaptogenesis, and neurogenesis. So in that sense, it also refers to the underlying mechanism of learning and memory formation, which triggers permanent renewal or regeneration within specific brain regions, such as the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. Specific cell differentiation or formation processes are also induced by immunological factors. And inflammation is not only recognized, but also reversed by a highly regulated and complex interacting network within specific molecular pathways. Thus, certain molecular pathways are the pacemaker to modulate the system in order to always be able to fall back on the regenerative loops of its own nature. Subsequently, the interplay and regulation of various biological systems is in some way determined by our DNA and the complex nature of its unique ability to maintain the organism in a state of homeostasis that leads to repeatedly responding in a fast, adequate, and organized manner. In other words, the DNA and its networks and subsequent functions that maintain homeostasis are the key regenerative structures.
Wow, this sounds really complex. So, did I get this right? Psychedelics have the potential to influence neuronal growth and even immunological functions?
Yes, indeed. Regarding neuronal growth, there are publications that include experiments showing that psychedelics induce structural changes in neurons. This is how the term psychoplastic has been born. For example, Alexander and Sarah, biologists from Quebec, highlight the potential of the immunomodulatory characteristics of psychedelics in a recent review article. Same as Kim Kubers from Maastricht reviewed the potential of the brain-gut axis in relation to the use of microdosing approaches to cultivate regeneration of the microbiome. As far as I understand, the molecular communication pathways linking the microbiome to the brain also play a very important role in terms of regenerative mechanisms. Our DNA is not alone in the body. Many interactions between the body and our symbiotic friends living in the digestive tract form a regenerative construct. This brain-gut axis is still quite underrepresented when the research community talks about the brain, our consciousness and health. In any case, the neurobiology of addiction has been further explored, and possible dopaminergic interactions through psychedelics lead to regeneration of the addicted brain.
So, would you argue that these mechanisms apply to every human being in the same way? Because as far as I understand, we're all made of the same substance?
So actually, I would say yes. We exist from the same substance, yes. Molecules are built the same way. DNA, enzymes, neurotransmitters, and so on, all are equipped with the same general framework in every human being.
Okay, but how would you explain inter-individual differences then?
There are general baselines that define a common optimal spectrum that determines all responses within the entire system. So the interactions between our genes and the environment, plus the adapted processes over time, make humans more individual within these spectra, in my understanding. This is because each person carries inside and with them their own unique background or history of stimuli, as I would say. Only the experience or the exchange with the environment or the variety of natural stimuli in the course of one's own development are responsible for realizing a desired optimum, even if there are general spectra or baselines. But when does the individual spectrum actually really start? In terms of epigenetics, researchers investigate transgenerational effects from one generation to another. That means my grandparents somehow also determine my baseline within these spectra.
Those are some really interesting questions you're touching upon, Caro. I'm also wondering, though, what would be a philosophical take on the subjective nature of experience there?
Well, when we talk explicitly about regeneration in terms of plasticity, we could also say that the brain itself is a regenerative structure, because every brain has the potential to restructure itself according to experience, right? That would imply, in regard to Caro's statement, that not only the brain, but the human being itself, namely the DNA, is in the broadest sense a potential regenerative structure. Additionally, consciousness as a fundamental ability, or rather the baseline, underlies all subjective experiences of all humans. But regardless of the genetic mechanisms of this baseline, which are the same in every human, the baseline of perception itself already differs from subject to subject. For instance, even if we can explain that one particular neurophysiological process is equal to feeling pain, and this is the same in every single human, this neuronal correlate will not be an explanation for the subjective experience of feeling pain. Levine has already introduced this philosophical paradigm in 1983 and called it the explanatory gap between physical processes and subjective experiences. In other words, it cannot be verified whether your experience of pain is the same as mine. This also applies to the value of subjective experiences. If our goal would be the cultivation of valuable states of consciousness, we would also have to accept individual and divergent valuations of those states. That does not have to be negative or restrictive per se. That is only a reminder that there could be various outcomes of a psychedelic session in regard to different personalities.
So if we're talking about different prerequisites that each individual brings to a psychedelic session, can we say that there is a range of possible states one can experience during these moments of altered consciousness, especially in respect of a regeneration structure?
Indeed, there's an emphasis on subjective phenomena such as peak experience or the afterglow period, as they are thought to mediate therapeutic action in different ways. This is where subjective qualities of perception each subject brings into a psychedelic session underpin the importance of set and setting. With set, we refer to the mindset a person brings to a psychedelic experience, and is influencing the outcome on a fundamental level, as well as a setting, meaning the design of the session per se, with providing support for arising experiences during the trip. So just like Louis Pasteur said, chance favors the prepared mind. So preparation and integration are the keys to create a valuable state of mind that the individual can benefit from. When we are talking about new qualities of experiences, there seems to be a high need for finding the right terminology. This is where we encounter epistemic limitations. How can we describe an experience that seems to be so different from our everyday consciousness, and moreover is also characterized by the ineffability of the experience itself?
Do you have any examples for that? Or are there even some diagnostic tools already?
There are some common diagnostic tools to assess the intensity of a psychedelic state, like the 5-dimensional altered state of consciousness rating scale or the mystical experience questionnaire. They share dimensions describing an altered sense of unity, so to say, an interconnectedness with all things, or even the universe itself, up to spiritual feelings as well as altered positive mood. Those are similar constructs trying to capture what is happening inside and might lead to substantial changes in behavior and perception. However, these are highly metaphorical terms suffering from different test theoretical limitations, like suggestibility through expectancy effects, and limited validity due to obvious psychotropic effects. Another problem of these experiences is that they are highly unpredictable, meaning there is no guarantee one will achieve this state, as the occurrence seems to be dose-dependent as well. What has been reported various times in the literature is that the intensity of these experiences seems to mediate beneficial effects. For example, the research group around Griffiths reported increased well-being at a 14-month follow-up among subjects that ranked the psilocybin experience as one of the most personally meaningful and spiritual significant experiences of their lives.
That's really stunning. But as you have already mentioned, it is hard to measure and compare these mystical experiences empirically. So there's not just a verbal lag to describe your own experience, but it seems almost impossible to place it in tangible concepts of perception. I mean, finding overlapping objective characteristics for peak experiences is really demanding, because most people already have great difficulty in introspecting and reporting experience details more than superficially. Probably, and for now, it would be more useful if we would concentrate on things we can already investigate objectively, like potential positive effects of psychedelics on communication patterns within the brain.
That's a good point, Svea. Now back to you, Kati. Are there any more concrete mechanisms how psychedelics display a potential role for regeneration?
Psychedelics act predominantly via serotonin receptor signaling, and other receptor pathways are under investigation as well. They seem to open a window of plasticity, as stated by Katharina. They exert acute action on high-level association cortices, as those receptors are most densely expressed in the cortex, especially in pyramidal neurons that function as key information integration units. In particular, during the acute phase of psychedelics, decreased oscillatory power of cortical rhythms has been observed and is conceptualized to be linked to disturbance of top-down predictive processing. A theoretical concept hypothesized to form predictions about what one can expect to encounter in interaction with the environment. In broad, we could say the brain becomes more flexible.
Could you explain this a bit further? For example, what exactly does that mean for a person who's taking psychedelics?
So, with the disintegration within brain networks, but increased functional integration on a global level, a model of action of psychedelics is proposed. A potential decomposition of high-level priors mirrors the heightened plasticity, a more uncertain state of the brain, also titled as entropy. This is in line with the model of a reduced thalamic filter, resulting in an increased information flow to certain cortical regions that is not balanced by integrative processing through association cortices, which results in the experience of psychedelic symptoms. With regard to the pathophysiology of psychological disorders like depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or even addiction, where implicit dysfunctional beliefs are resulting in rigid defensive behavioral patterns, psychedelics provide the potential of revision through subjective phenomena like ego dissolution. The consumer might experience insight on a level that can result in fundamental shifts of perspective. Even post-acute changes in brain connectivity and metabolism have been observed. So this is where the importance of psychotherapeutic intervention comes into play to benefit from acute plasticity in the long term.
I think it is quite hard to formulate concrete mechanisms, and there's still a lack of clear definitions. But to come back to the psychedelics' potential as regenerative structure, I would also set epigenetic marks and their regulatory pathways as an interesting player for psychedelics-induced regeneration. In basic research, these mechanisms and their structures are often described in the context of various diseases or maladaptive developmental processes. The other side of that coin here is the regeneration as a kind of optimization potential through the underlying processes by promoting resilience in any kind of output and benefiting from a recovered system to transmit to next generations. We need to consider the potential of these psychobiological aspects here, which relates to epigenetic patterns that alter stress responses and lead to some kind of resilience or active coping strategies at the behavioral level, which have been well demonstrated in animal studies. So it is very interesting to know more about these epigenetic alterations that could be induced by psychedelics. There's still some work to be done on that psychedelic biology fronts.
I see. So, biologically speaking, there is a lot going on at different levels. The molecular pathways, cell differentiation, neuronal processing, which all somehow potentially change behavioral patterns. As our society is in desperate need for positive changes, which we can see as regenerative structures, how do you think this can be applied on a societal level? Could those regenerative structures be used within the concept of Bewusstseinskultur?
So, first of all, those regenerative structures could be part of a new Bewusstseinskultur according to the idea of Thomas Metzinger, since his whole concept is about the systematic cultivation of valuable states of consciousness. Nevertheless, the underlying question of a Bewusstseinskultur is, what is a good life? Therefore, the goal for every individual in a society is to increase their autonomy when dealing with their own states of consciousness. Starting from the personal perspective, one has to answer the question, what kinds of states constitute my own life worth living. But regarding a whole society, one has to think about general desirable states of consciousness as well. Due to the fact that we are living in a world that can be described as a co-created reality, people can support each other in cultivating valuable states, and this can be realized in different ways. One possible way could indeed include psychedelic experiences, and thus the chance to learn from facilitators how to choose and cultivate certain states of consciousness.
This has been really eye-opening, everyone. Thank you for those insights. Before we start the psychedelic revolution, though, there are still a lot of questions left to be answered. Questions we have also encountered during our Unimind sessions. The grass is not always greener on the other side. We still need to keep in mind that new medication also comes along with potential side effects and dangers. Plus, there's always the risk for creating false hopes, especially when talking about treatment-resistant disorders, right? Of course, we cannot answer all these questions by ourselves, so we would like to hand it over to the audience to discuss with us.
Thank you so much. Wow. What a lovely conversation, and I'm glad we got a peek of what is happening inside your Unimind group.
Yes.
I don't know if, okay, there we go. So we have a question for you, and then I have a comment about this podcast format that you're using, which people behind the scenes were really excited about. Is there going to be an international Unimind collaboration? Can we continue this project? You may want to consider that. Also, Anna-Marie did a fantastic job moderating that discussion. I was jealous. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you to just say hi, each one of you, since we were just listening to you. That will be nice. And I'll also ask the question that came in, which was from Simon, who was asking, describing and categorizing spiritual peak states using analytical terms almost seems paradoxical. Could you describe the reason for this need or drive? And any one of you can choose to answer. That's the one we have. And we only have time for one.
Yeah, so first, so we can introduce ourselves. So I'm Caro, so I'm the biologist perspective here, and yeah, so this is Katharina.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kati, and I'm a clinical, I'm studying clinical neuroscience, so I'm in the Master of Psychology right now.
Yeah, same goes for me. I'm Anna-Marie. I'm also doing my master's in psychology, but on the cognitive neuroscience front.
Yeah, and my name is Svea. I have studied philosophy, neuroscience, cognition. So I'm the philosophical aspect of this podcast. And yeah, regarding to the question, I would say that the difficulty lies in building up subjective experience or one-person data to three-person or third perspective data to make it empirically to have some results that can be shown. And so that is really difficult, as the comment already said. But if we want to have results in this direction, we have to find a solution where we can kind of sum this experience up.
Also to like kind of make it comparable to other experiences and to, I guess, draw conclusions how to proceed with research as well.
That's right. I mean, right now we only have our language to describe what is happening. So yeah, it's hard to find terminology that fits for all, as everyone experiences it somehow different on this trip. So yeah, this is a problem in research, definitely.
Point.
Covered everything. Thank you so much. Thank you, all four of you. It was a pleasure to listen in, and do think about this podcast format. You have fans already. That's it.
Yes, actually, we think about sharing it in the universities time, and also, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can make it available for the whole UniMind group would become.
It was also the idea to make some kind of advertisement for the Magdeburger to gain more members for Magdeburg group. So yeah.
Amazing. One of the longer standing groups, if I'm correct. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you stick around for the next presentations.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure. Thanks for giving us the chance to do so.
Yeah, of course.